What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Windy City Gridiron Radio of Windy City Gridiron for SB Nation. As always, Robert Zaglinski hosting, and today we're going to preview the Detroit Lions in the first of three preview podcasts before training camp around the NFC North. Joining me is my good friend, Ryan Matthews, who, as much as he'll say he hates me or I talk about his – we're not going to discuss specifics, but what I talk about, he doesn't always appreciate. He is an editor with Pride of Detroit, and he's going to help me break down the Lions and what can we expect, things about Matthew Stafford's contract, things along those lines. Ryan, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing wonderful, even though you probably loosely used the term friend. But yeah,
No,
I'm doing great.
Ryan, we're very good friends. Don't let the listeners know that we have a bigger schism, in as the word you would use, than an egregious schism. Than they need to know. We're fantastic friends. We've known each other for a long time. It's always good to catch up with you.
Great to see you again.
Let's jump right into it. I already mentioned Matthew Stafford's contract. He's going to be a pending unrestricted free agent. It's the dead of summer, so you talk about contracts this time of year. There's not really any actual game news or any player movement. He is a franchise quarterback. He is, depending on who you talk to, he can be top 10 quarterback, top 15, whatever. He was an MVP candidate for parts of the year last year. What's the deal there? What's holding everything up? Why isn't he signed yet? You would think you'd want a guy locked up for 6 months before February, so 7 or 8 months before his contract is up.
Sure, yeah. Everybody isn't really waiting on pins and needles, per se, for Stafford to sign his contract. I think they're pretty certain that he is as good as locked up to an extension. It's just a matter of a certain date passing, and that certain date is July 15th. We're waiting on whether or not Kirk Cousins signs the deal, because Matthew Stafford, even though he is 29 years old, going into this contract, this might be one of his last big contracts. So I think he wants to make sure that he gets every dollar that he deserves. Once Derek Carr signed his 5-year, $125 million contract with the $60 million guarantee at the end of June, that was one roadblock that needed to be overcome before Stafford got to the details of his contract. But like I said, I think they're really waiting on the Kirk Cousins domino to either fall or not fall. I think Washington can still franchise tag him for one more season if they'd like. So whether or not they reach a deal by that point, I think you would expect a Stafford contract definitely done before the season starts. I don't think that they're going to let this spill over to the regular season at all.
What kind of numbers would we expect? Would he get more money than Carr? Would he get more money guaranteed than Carr?
I think similar. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be something similar, but I definitely think he's going to ask for more, and I think he deserves more. I think that he's obviously played a little bit longer than Carr. He has a little bit longer of a track record, like you mentioned earlier. He was an MVP candidate last year until his finger.
Until his finger, yeah, and the line's faltered off a little bit. So
was that your boy Leonard Floyd's face mask that I got mangled in?
Actually, it was. So
okay. Well, we'll keep that to the side. We'll table that. But yeah, he should definitely. You should expect to see Stafford's contract to be a little bit richer than Derek Carr's. I think maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of like 5 years, $130 million, or 5 years, $135 million. It's not going to be anything exorbitant like the $30 million per year that a lot of people are throwing out, but it should be somewhere in that neighborhood.
Is there a possibility that, because you just mentioned it with Cousins, and I don't really see that this is likely, but could they tag Stafford? Could they really hold it off? I mean, I don't see how they would. He's pretty established with the Lions, and they haven't put it off in the past like the Redskins have.
Right. I don't think that they would want it to reach that point, just because I think that I think Stafford genuinely wants to be here. Obviously, I think the Lions definitely want to keep him here. When Bob Quinn came to Detroit, I think a very attractive part of the job was the fact that they had a franchise quarterback in place. So I don't think that they would want to let things get to that point where they would have to end up franchise tagging him. I don't foresee that happening at all. Like I said, I think an extension is definitely going to be done before the season comes.
So one of the big things about is Stafford on his first or second contract, just to check, just to reference.
Stafford is well, he had his rookie deal. He was one of the last guys who he was one of the last of the dying guard of rookies who had the who weren't under the
under the
salary scale. Yeah. So he had that contract, and then he's on it. This will be his third contract that he signed.
Okay, so is there concern? Or not? I mean, this isn't something you really think about when you have a franchise guy that can win you games. But is there concern that maybe the Lions' offense isn't totally ready, or the team as a whole isn't totally ready for Stafford to take up such a huge part of their salary cap? Because part of the big thing about having a fifth-year option on quarterbacks you draft in the first round, which is obviously not a concern with Stafford anymore from the previous rookie scale you mentioned, is that if you win within those first 4 or 5 years, like a championship or you're a playoff contender, then you're paying them on the cheap before you have to pay them well. So Stafford's about to get probably a pay raise. He's going to get more money guaranteed. Is there that sentiment going around maybe that the Lions aren't ready? I mean, they're clearly on the ascension, but are they
there yet?
Yeah.
I think that they're definitely on their way up, and I think that they don't have a lot of money committed to other players quite yet. Another name that we haven't mentioned is Ezekiel Ansah. He's going to be a free agent at the end of this year. He will be an unrestricted free agent as well. He'll be looking for another deal too. So beyond any other big contracts, Darius Slay is a rather I guess a weighty contract you would say, but they avoided being so cash strapped with their salary cap by one, losing Ndamukong Suh to Miami, and two, Calvin Johnson no longer being a part of the team.
Okay.
If those guys were still around, maybe you would take that under consideration. But with quarterbacks being such an important part of a team, I think that regardless, I think that Stafford, whatever the price it was to keep him in town, the Lions would spend it, because that's essentially where every team starts.
Before we jump to other players and the rest of the Lions offense, talk about Brad Kaya, your boy Brad Kaya. What's this obsession? I always see you arguing with Jeremy on Twitter. I always see you prepping him up. What's this? I mean, what's the deal, dude?
How does a player go from being initially mocked as like the #1 player in the draft to falling to the 6th round? I don't understand how that happens.
Well, Deshaun Watson was a #1 overall pick consensus in 2015, and then 2016, and then he drops off. I mean, it happened.
He dropped to what, number 12?
Yeah.
So he dropped 11 spots versus like 100 plus.
Okay, what about Matt Barkley? Matt Barkley was going to be a consensus #1 overall pick. By the end of his college career, he's a 3rd round pick. So
I mean, would you say that Matt Barkley is a pretty average quarterback? Like, would you be happy if he was still the Bears' backup quarterback?
Backup?
Would you be content?
No, because he turned the ball over. He threw 12 picks in 5 games.
All right. Well,
he threw 12 picks. A good backup is a backup that doesn't turn the ball over whatsoever, that plays within himself, throws for 200, 220 yards, rarely throws picks or takes chances. Barkley, even when he's not taking chances, the ball will sail, and he's just not accurate enough. He just makes too many mistakes. He's not a backup I would want if that's who we're going to compare to Brad Kaya. So
you were throwing out names, and I was just trying to respond with, hey, look, some things apparently just don't go according to plan, but Brad Kaya went from being the consensus #1 pick to falling all the way to the 6th round. I think that the Lions did a wonderful job. It's always been Bob Quinn's modus operandi to draft a quarterback. Every year he's drafted a quarterback. He drafted Jake Rudock last year. He drafted Brad Kaya this year. He mentioned that it's always about trying to churn over the talent, especially at that position, because if the guy ends up, say they end up hitting on Brad Kaya and all of a sudden he becomes the talk of the town in 2 or 3 years, kind of like how Jimmy Garoppolo is now, all of a sudden now you have a valuable asset on your hands. The Lions tend to only keep 2 quarterbacks on their roster, though. They had to move Jake Rudock from the practice squad up to the official roster because the Bears were interested in him. The thing that I see in Kaya, though, is that he's such a rhythm quarterback. Al Golden, who was his head coach in Miami for a little bit, now works as the tight ends coach for the Lions. So there's some connection there. I mean, he's the guy who recruited Kaya to come to Miami. So I think that they have a good understanding of how he fits in this offense. If he were to come in and run the offense, he's a very rhythm passer. He likes hitting the horizontal routes. He has limited mobility, but I think that
he's a statue.
I think his arm is just much more pro than Jake Rudock. Like, if you've seen Jake Rudock throw a football, you are just rather largely unimpressed. I think that what Kaya would serve is just a better. He would serve better as the backup than Jake Rudock down the road. At this point, Jake Rudock has a little bit more experience. He has one extra year, but I think Jim Harbaugh did a pretty good job polishing him up. I'm a fan of Kaya. I hope they hold on to him. He won't last on the practice squad. Do you think that he would last on the practice squad? Or do you think he'd be poached?
I mean, he'd probably be poached because there's still potential. No one's seen him do anything in the league anymore, but I wasn't a huge fan of him. I think he's probably in a good situation in that he's not going to have to play, that he'll develop behind Stafford. If he's the guy that you're developing as your rookie to start eventually, I think he'd probably fail immediately. I still don't see it with the Lions or really anybody, but I mean, he landed in the right spot. So it's about like turning him into kind of like a Matt Schaub, essentially, what the Falcons did when they had Mike Vick and Matt Schaub. Or no, Matt Ryan and Matt Schaub, right?
Well, even Mike Vick and Matt Schaub, because when Mike Vick had to take that little trip to prison, all of a sudden Matt Schaub was the starting quarterback. So hopefully Matthew Stafford doesn't ever get indicted federally on anything. So
a little trip to prison, yeah, that's just a tiny trip to prison.
Hey, I'm just saying. Last year, 7 interceptions for Brad Kaya. He just turned the ball over the whole lot. He's fine.
Okay.
He can sit and hold the clipboard.
Okay, aside from the quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So let's talk rookie additions. Jared Davis, Tabor, right? Tabor.
Mm-hmm. Jalen Tabor, I think.
Jalen Tabor as well. Jalen Tabor officially, so that's his nickname.
Yeah.
The guy from Northern Illinois, I forget his name. It escapes me. I pulled it up in Pro Football Reference five minutes before to memorize it. I forgot it. Kenny Galladay.
Kenny Galladay, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so who's like turned heads so far? Who are Lions fans, writers, everything most excited for his potential? So let's like run through some of these guys.
Okay, sure. Jared Davis. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so Jared Davis, I think, is the player that most Lion fans are banking on being productive right out of the gate, and I think that would be the safest assumption. He's going to officially fit in as the team's middle linebacker. He's going to slide in. He's going to take over for Tyre Whitehead, who was, for a lack of a better term, atrocious last year. He wasn't very good in coverage. He wasn't very good stopping the run. He'll slide back over and he'll play his more natural position at Sam linebacker. So I think Jared Davis is the player that most Lion fans are banking on, just improving that linebacking core from being the worst unit on the team by far to being maybe below average, because there's still a lot of work to go. I don't think Tyre Whitehead is any more than a depth linebacker. They added Paul Warlow in free agency, who's really a Bob Quinn kind of guy. He plays special teams, but you really wouldn't want him starting. He wasn't playing much for the Falcons other than special teams. They have a rookie linebacker a second-year guy in Antoine Williams who might figure in. They have a lot of work to do when it comes to linebackers. So Jared Davis is the guy that Lions fans are banking on playing well from the get-go. I think the guy who has the most potential is the guy that you mentioned, Kenny Galladay. In training camp, people will really have their eyes glued to him because he's going to fill in that third wide receiver role for Anquan Boldin that he so sure-handedly played last season. Galladay was so impressive in rookie minicamp that he had beat writers just glowing about him. He was like, I mean, he's the prototypical, this guy hasn't dropped the pass, this guy made this catch over, this defender. He's looked, everything under the sun that they could say well about Kenny Galladay. To put it this way, I didn't read one bad thing about Kenny Galladay during rookie minicamp. I'm trying to keep my expectations.
Isn't that more hype?
Oh, yeah, it is more hype. It is more hype than anything. But I think that he's going to serve a really large role. One guy that I was really interested in the Lions getting was Kendall Wright, who ended up going to the Bears.
Mhm.
But that was just because the third wide receiver on the Lions offense serves such an important role because the Lions are in 3 wide receiver formations more than just about any team in the league. I think they lined up in 3 wide receiver sets over 700 snaps. So they really like to run 3 wide. So Kenny Golladay is going to have a big workload right out of the gate.
What about Jalen Tabor, whatever it is officially that?
Yeah.
So he dropped because he wasn't fast enough. He didn't run a fast enough 40 at his combine or pro day. Which one was it? It was his pro day or his combine first. So
yeah.
So there's no concern that he might not be able to keep up. If I'm not mistaken, the Lions run a kind of cover too, so it might not really matter, right?
Yeah, Terrell Austin loves to run a lot of off-man stuff. Tabor is definitely a guy who I envision playing outside. I don't see him really figuring into the slot, but then again, that's why they went out, they got DJ Hayden. Quandre Diggs is going to come back. They drafted Jamal Agnew. He was a guy out of a small school out in California. So they have other options to play nickel. Nevin Lawson is the guy who plays opposite of Slay. I don't see Tabor really pushing for that position. They're going to bring Tabor along slowly. I don't think that it's going to be any kind of like trial by fire thing. See Tabor playing in a very limited fashion, unless an injury forces something. I'm not sure if I see him playing a whole lot this season, but Bob Quinn really did his homework on him. Bob Quinn said that he watched more Tabor tape than he had of any other prospect ever. And this was the guy who was a former director of pro scouting for the New England Patriots. So if he's sold on him and he sees something in him on tape that doesn't necessarily translate to the measurables, I'm going to trust his judgment. But I think that's where Lions fans should be at with Tabor. I think some of them are expecting him to kind of push Nevin Lawson. I don't see that at all whatsoever. Like I said, he'd be hard-pressed to, I think, find snaps in his rookie season.
And he doesn't have to be the number 1 corner when he eventually steps in either, because you have Darius Slay, who's extremely underrated. So
for sure.
This is Windy City Gridiron Radio, episode 6. We're previewing the Lions in 2017 with Ryan Matthews from Pride of Detroit. Do the Lions – I wanted to ask this because I prepared this specifically. Do the Lions have enough of a pass rush? Is the defense good enough to repeat last year's performance? Because if we're being honest, and this isn't my bias speaking at all, the Lions did enjoy better than regular fortune last year in a lot of games. So is the defense improved enough to sustain another playoff appearance, especially the pass rush?
Sure. The pass rush has not improved at all. I don't think it's gotten any better. It hasn't made any market improvements just because there hasn't been a whole lot done. The only guys that Bob Quinn has gone out and signed, I mean, he went out and got Akeem Spence from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who was kind of floundering there. Akeem Spence talked about how he wasn't, he didn't fill the type of role that he thinks that he could come to Detroit and really capitalize on. They went out and they got Cornelius Washington, a guy that you're pretty familiar with and Bears fans are pretty familiar with. I think that he's much better suited to play in a 4-3. But I'm not banking on those guys doing a whole lot. Ezekiel Ansah was hurt for a lot of last season. Him being healthy, does that help the pass rush? Absolutely. Does him being in a contract year help the pass rush? Absolutely. But the guy opposite of him is still Kerry Hyder. He had a really good season. He had 8 sacks. But it was a little bit inconsistent. I still think that he would be best served as kind of like a third guy rotating in. They bump him inside sometimes on third down on passing downs just because he's a little bit quicker. The pass rush hasn't done enough to generate enough pressure on the quarterback because I definitely think that the secondary is the strength. Absolutely, it's the strength of the defense, but the linebackers are still a little bit iffy when it comes to coverage. So the Lions are definitely still susceptible to getting beaten up by the pass, which they did a lot last season.
So I kind of a nice segue. A lot of people have pointed out that or used the Lions as a team primed to relatively regress. So not necessarily to fall off and be 3-13 or 4-12, but instead of making the playoffs, be a 7-9, 8-8 team, 6-10, that they're improved, but they're still working their way up. Is that something you see, or do you see the Lions being more or staying in line with last year's performance, surprising some people?
They could stand us. To surprise some people, but I think as long as Matthew Stafford is your quarterback, you're going to always be in just about every game. And if Stafford can play as well as he played in the first half of last season, then maybe they're still a fringe a fringe playoff team. I wouldn't necessarily pencil them in as NFC North contenders by any means. Let me put it this way: the Lions' schedule in the first half, their first 8 games, I think that they would be their best case scenario is 4-4.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have a very tough start to the schedule. Like the NFC North, they play the NFC South, and I think the NFC South is really no joke when it comes to the Falcons and the Saints and the Buccaneers. Yeah, those are all really promising teams. Carolina Panthers, they're a year removed from being in the Super Bowl, so I really. They could regress totally. They could end up as a 6-10 team, but they could be better than last year and still end up 6-10 or 7-9. If that makes any sense. So
they would just have it'd be about having worse luck while being a better team.
Right. Stafford had 8 come from behind victories last season. They had 9 wins.
Yeah, to repeat that again, that's probably not the best case. So what's the moving on from that?
Mm-hmm.
How does Lions land look at the Bears right now? I understand there's a lot of jokes about Trubisky and Glennon, but on an honest thing, without joking about it, how do people who follow the Lions look at the Bears as a rival? Since we can go along those lines.
Sure, I think a lot of people still disrespect the Bears. I think it's been that way for the past few years. Last season, when the Lions went into Chicago, they got their teeth punched in, and they looked like a complete mess. And I think what speaks volumes about how Lions fans think about the Bears is that after that loss, it was blow it all up. It was Golden Tate doesn't belong on this team. It was Jim Caldwell deserves to be fired. It was this. It was that. It was just very damaging to lose to the Bears. So I think that Lions fans so disrespect the Bears as a team, as an organization, whatever you want to say, that I think they kind of underestimate the Bears. And I'm not saying that the Bears are in a great spot.
They're not good. That's not what I'm saying. Yeah. But
right. But I just think that when it comes to a divisional game, it's always a really tough game because these games are so valuable, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that Lions fans can be a little bit disrespectful, and I'm definitely guilty of this. But I think they need to be wary of the fact that Jordan Howard, I think, is a top 5 running back in the NFL.
I'd say that. Probably number 5, though. But yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to overstep my bounds, but I definitely think he's a top 5 running back, and he only stands to get better as the Bears' offensive line improves, as the rest of their team improves, once they get some consistent quarterback play. But yeah, I think the general consensus is that a lot of Lions fans look at the Bears as the basement bottom dwellers of the division and that they should always finish above them. And they usually look at the schedule, and when the schedule was released, it was, okay, well, 2 wins against the Bears, and then let's figure out where we're going to get our other 7 or our other 8 wins to make it into the playoffs. And I don't think that for a second. I never want to overlook the Bears.
That's the crazy thing about it, too, because both games that the teams played last year were like really tight and that played down to the wire. Even the one that the Detroit won at home, that was what, 24-20. That was a tough score. That was a really tight game. So, it's kind of like you said, the divisional rivalry. If anything, I know you guys have the "We Own the Bears" hashtag. I'll answer Jeremy's question because he quote tweeted to me. It's probably like a 6 on a scale of 10 how much the Lions own the Bears, considering they only have like 1 win against them in the past 4 seasons. But yeah, it's still a divisional rivalry. So these games they shouldn't be overlooked in my mind.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. Yeah.
Okay, so specifically outside of Howard, what's an area that you think? So in the 2 games the Bears and Lions will play as usual in 2017, what's an area that the Bears would have an advantage on over Detroit?
Oh, without a doubt, the pass rush. I think without a doubt, as long as Pernell McPhee is looking to be healthy, am I right? Is he going to be?
I'm shaking my hand. Probably, maybe. I mean, he's really good when he's on the field, but he hasn't played a 16-game season yet. So I mean, he started last year on the PUP, and then the year before that, he played in 12 games, and they shut him down early because of the knee that bothered him, that put him on the PUP. He lost a little weight, so he's like 260 now. He's been playing at 280, so maybe that'll help. But I'm not confident in it until he actually does it, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah, I would have noted the pass rush, but the Lions' offensive line, adding Ricky Wagner, pretty strong overall. So I'm not sure how that's two Rams butting heads, more or less.
Maybe a lot of it depends on the health of Taylor Decker too, though. And personally, I am not expecting Taylor Decker to play this season because I don't think that
he hurt his shoulder, right?
He did, yeah. He tore his labrum. You're looking at probably about, I think, a timeline for him to come back realistically during the season, maybe I would say after the bye week, and they have the bye week in week 8, so maybe week 9, week 10. But I don't think that they would want to push that along. That's the anchor of your offensive line. He's the left tackle. He's the blindside protector. He's the most important piece of that offensive line. He's young. Why would you want to risk pushing him back when you? I don't think the Lions view themselves as NFC North contenders necessarily. They definitely view themselves, like I said, on the up and up, but I don't think that they would want to rush Taylor Decker back just for this season. So I think they'll be very cautious with him. With that being said, yeah, they added TJ Lang. They added Ricky Wagner. But I still think my lasting image of last season when the Lions played the Bears in that second game was that the Bears were just all over Stafford, like all game. They were providing a ton of pressure all game.
Floyd had 9 pressures in that second Detroit game. I mean, he didn't have any sacks, but he had 9 pressures. Leonard Floyd, that is.
Right, your boy. Yeah, your boy Leonard Floyd. So I think the pass rush. I think it'll still be something that the Bears can definitely put on the Lions, and they could still stand. You said without thinking about Jordan Howard, but I still think that they'll beat him up on the ground with Jordan Howard. So defense running sounds like the Chicago Bears. Maybe it's just not where it needs to be.
Not really yet. Yeah.
Right.
A bit of a touchy subject. I'm pretty positive. So Calvin Johnson, the saga of his retirement and comments he's made in the past month or so, recently said, apparently he found in an Italian video, as noted again by Jeremy, the editor-in-chief of Pride of Detroit.
We broke that story, by the way.
You broke that story. Absolutely broke that story. Everyone else jumped on it and stole it. He slammed the Lions that I didn't see a chance for them to win the Super Bowl as the reason why he retired early at 30 years old. A future Hall of Fame receiver. How's the reaction been so far? I mean, I saw this storyline kind of building up in minicamp. I saw of people. He was helping out the Raiders as a guest coach, assistant coach, whatever you want to call it. What's the reaction been like?
Initially, when Calvin showed up to the Raiders camp and was helping out, he showed up in the Raiders gear. Some people were perturbed by it, but some people were really still upset with the Lions about being so finicky about asking for part of the signing bonus back.
Part of his signing bonus. That's what I was going to mention. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a small portion of it. They were contractually and legally, they could have taken the whole thing back, but they only took a percentage of it, as far as we understand. That's what Dave Burkett from the Free Press ran with. So that's kind of what we're going off of. Beyond that, there seems to be a lot more things bubbling underneath the surface than just money. When Calvin comes out and makes these comments like this, it seems like there is a little bit more to the situation than just money. Because Calvin Johnson signed a huge contract. I'm sure he's set up for life. He wasn't on Dancing with the Stars because he was hungry for money after he was all done playing football. Initially, it was, let's back the guy who is the best wide receiver in the franchise's history. Mm-hmm. Everybody was on Calvin's side, I would say, for the most part. I would say maybe like 80-20. Now it's definitely just the scales have tipped the other way from these comments. I think that a lot of people are upset with Calvin. I think they have the right to be upset with Calvin, but I think that we need to understand that he made these comments almost 2 years now after he's been retired. He didn't make these comments before the trade deadline. these things weren't public while he was still a active NFL player. I think he does harbor a lot of bad feelings, I think, towards the Lions, though, because when they asked him, would you still be interested in playing in the NFL? He said, well, that's just not even an option because Detroit said that I would have to come back and play for them because I would still be under contract.
Right. So how comparable is this to Barry Sanders?
Barry Sanders. To Barry Sanders. Yeah, I know. I was having a discussion with another member of Pride of Detroit, Jerry Mallory, about this, who said that the Calvin Johnson saga, after what happened or after what came to light today, these comments, that it is worse than the Barry Sanders saga. Granted, I was just coming out of 4th grade, I think, when the Barry Sanders saga was going on. But from what I've read and recollected about the Sanders saga was that when he retired, it was in the midst of training camp. He just didn't show up. It wasn't like Calvin at the end of the season where at the beginning of the 2015 season, he told a lot of people, I'm done, keep it private. And then after the season was over, I'm retired. Barry just didn't show up to training camp. And then Barry was so adamant about not playing for the Lions that he was willing to give back half of his contract. At that time, I think he was willing to give back $5.5 million if the Lions would release him from his contract so he could go play somewhere else. That was a pretty nasty situation, and there wasn't a whole lot of Barry Sanders. There weren't a whole lot of people in Barry Sanders' camp, I think, when that whole saga was playing out. I'm just a little bit cautious to say that the Calvin Johnson saga has gotten that bad. But then again, he's showing up at Raiders minicamp wearing Raiders gear. He's not showing up, at Lions minicamp helping out the wide receivers. So it only gets worse from here. I'm wondering who's going to extend the olive branch.
Okay, so after all this egregious chicanery, in the words of a wise man, so let's give me an honest prediction on what the Lions do in 2017 record-wise, and if they make the playoffs, whatever else, any award winners, just throw it all on a plate.
Oh man, it's July 11th.
Just do it.
What are you doing?
We're 2 weeks out of camp, man. It's hype. If you want to hype your team up, go ahead. But just give or give me an honest assessment.
You want to give me? I'll give you some hype. The Lions will finish 8-8.
All right. 8-8.
That's all the hype you're going to get on July 11th. There's going to be so much that's going to happen during training camp. The Lions do not have a left tackle right now, Rob.
Yeah, without Taylor Decker, that's true.
They're trying to figure out if it's Cyrus Kwanjo. They're trying to figure out if it's Greg Robinson. They're trying to figure out if it's Joe Dahl moving from left guard to left tackle. We don't know. The Lions don't have a left tackle yet. There are so many camp battles to be had, especially for the Lions. I don't know if Amir Abdullah is going to be healthy. There's a lot of things that hinge on whether or not this season could be a total. Let me put it this way. This season is either going to be an unmitigated disaster, or because Matthew Stafford is so damn good, the Lions might squeak their way back into the playoffs. It falls somewhere in between there.
But they won't challenge the Packers, is what I'm gauging here. So the Packers are probably still the favorite because of Aaron Rodgers. Mostly.
Yes. Yeah. Aaron Rodgers.
I think you sound a little annoyed, man. Listen, I'm in the same boat here, so
I know. They'll finish above the Bears. There's my bold take.
Ooh, if you have me out on your guys' podcast, I was actually going to say they're probably going to finish the same record. So.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
So Ryan, again, and I'll say it again, after all of this egregious chicanery, thanks for coming on, man. Actually, I'm surprised we kept this professional. If anyone listening doesn't know, Ryan and I normally trade swings. He's the biggest Browns, Patriots, Clemson, Cubs, and North Carolina fan there is. He's a huge bandwagon fan. That's for some reason covers Lions. He loves the Warriors. He owns a LeBron James, Sidney Crosby, Tom Brady, Cody Kessler jerseys of all of them, all these players, all these superstars. Mm-hmm.
I took all of their jerseys and I knitted them into a quilt, and I use it to keep me warm at night.
You're like a beach bro. You take it to the beach, and you lay it out, and you set your cooler there. That's what you do. So don't lie to the people. Don't let them know. But yeah, normally, guys, Ryan and I are trading jabs, and we actually kept it calm enough to have some good lines analysis. I'm kind of surprised. I'm pleasantly surprised.
There's a reason you had me on the show, Rob. There's a reason you reached out to me. I understand that. Let's not ruin all of the goodwill that we've just put out in the world, okay?
Hey, man, we're friends. We've been friends for a while. We've been friends for years. I had a beer with you the other night.
That's right. That's right.
All right, Ryan, where can they follow you? Where can they follow your work? Any other hype for your own work? At Ryan, it's at Ryan POD. Is there, you want to tease anything?
I will. Yeah, I will not tease Tabor anything, but the Twitter handle is at Ryan _.
POD. My apologies. I was going off memory.
Right. But oh well, thank you, Rob. See, I'm in your mentions so much that you almost remembered my Twitter handle.
But
for my bad
movie takes. For my bad movie takes, apparently, that are very good.
Shawshank Redemption is your favorite film of all time.
It is the greatest movie ever. It is the greatest. It's a movie that if it comes on TV, you could be like dressed up for a big night out, and you're like flipping the channel, like waiting for like a text from your buddies. Oh shit, Morgan Freeman talking about his best friend Andy Dufresne. Looks like I'm not gonna go out until fucking 11 o'clock. Like that's what happens. It is fantastic.
If that happens to me, I'm saying, hey, look, Shawshank is on for like the 3rd time this week on TNT. I'll catch it never again because I've seen it once.
I think that should be a good note. Yeah, follow Ryan out on Twitter at Ryan _POD. He's an editor at Pride of Detroit. He does good work covering the Lions, and he's a very good friend. This has been Windy City Gridiron Radio of Windy City Gridiron of SB Nation. I'm Robert Zaglinski. Follow me on Twitter at Robert Zaglinski. Stay classy, everybody.
Your mom.